At the altar, with her dress still damp from tears, she waited for a man who never came. But when the church doors opened, it wasn't the groom who walked in. It was his brother, cold, reserved, a billionaire. And in front of everyone, he made a proposal no one expected. Marry me. What started as a contract became a love no one dared to believe in, but what happened next, no one there could have imagined. If this story touches your heart, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening to this message from? Your support is what keeps this channel alive and full of love. The floral scent of white roses filled the air, lingering on the satin walls of the bridal suite like a memory that refused to let go. Emily Parker stood still in front of the mirror, her fingers trembling as they tried to secure her grandmother's pearl earrings, a final gift from the woman who had raised her when no one else had. The soft rustle of silk followed every movement she made in the ivory gown that hugged her curves with timeless grace, a gown chosen with hope, now heavy with dread. Downstairs, the string quartet had begun to play. Guests filled the wooden pews of the century-old chapel, whispering behind hymnals and adjusting their ties. But in the quiet room above it all, Emily was alone, except for the echo of a question she hadn't dared ask out loud. Where was Lucas? Her fiancé, Lucas Bennett, had always been the golden boy, charming, ambitious, the youngest partner at a Manhattan law firm, with a smile that once melted all her doubts. Their engagement had been rushed but passionate, filled with late-night promises and stolen weekends. Everyone said they were perfect for each other, everyone but the one man who hadn't said more than 10 words to her since they met. His brother. Emily's heart raced as her maid of honor knocked once, opened the door and stepped inside, pale, nervous, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Emily, I don't know how to say this. She didn't need her to. The silence was already deafening. Minutes passed, or maybe it was years. Emily barely noticed the sound of her own sobs as she sank onto the velvet bench, her veil falling to the side like a defeated flag. Shame burned her cheeks. Her lips trembled, her vision blurred, and somewhere beneath the devastation a tiny voice whispered, "You should have seen this coming." But she hadn't. Not this. Not being left at the altar with hundreds of eyes waiting and no groom walking down the aisle. Then a knock. Firmer, colder. Emily looked up, and her breath caught. Standing in the doorway was Nathan Bennett, Lucas's older brother, billionaire CEO, infamous for his stoicism, control, and empire built from the ruins of their family name. Always in black suits, always surrounded by silence and mystery. Now he stood before her in a tailored tuxedo, as calm as ever, his steel-gray eyes scanning the room before finally resting on hers. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low, smooth, impossible to read. "But you don't have much time." Emily blinked, stunned. "Excuse me?" "The guests are waiting," he continued, "and Lucas isn't coming." His words weren't cruel, just clinical, like he was stating facts in a boardroom. "I know that," she whispered, trying to hold herself together. "I'm not going out there." "I didn't think you would," he said. A pause. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. "That's why I came." "For what?" Her voice cracked. "To confirm the humiliation, or offer PR cleanup for the family's image?" A muscle flickered in his jaw. Then he pulled a small velvet box from his inner pocket and placed it gently on the vanity beside her. "I'm offering you something else entirely." Emily stared at the box like it might explode. "What is that?" "A ring. My ring." His voice didn't waver. "Marry me. Now. Today." The silence that followed was so thick, it felt like the room itself had stopped breathing. She stood slowly, clutching the back of the chair for balance. "Are you out of your mind?" "No." He met her gaze with terrifying calm. "This wedding was publicized. Important clients are here, donors, the press, my father, your family. You've given everything to make today real, and I won't let him take that from you." "So this is about image?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's about respect," he replied, "for you, for what was promised." Emily stared at him, trying to process. "You hardly know me." "I know enough. You're kind, graceful, resilient. You kept this family together after Lucas burned every bridge. And whether he ran or was pushed, he's not here. I am. The room felt impossibly small. Her pulse roared in her ears. This is insane, she said, softer now. Marriage is not some business deal you can sign to save face. No, he said, but sometimes it begins as one. She looked down at the ring box, then at her reflection, mascara smeared, veil slipping, heart in pieces. She had dreamed of a love that felt like music, of vows whispered with trembling hands and eyes that saw only her. But now she stood before the ashes of those dreams, and in front of her was a man offering a different kind of promise, not of love but of safety, of dignity, of not having to walk out there alone. I'm not asking you to feel anything for me, he said quietly. I'm asking you to say yes for yourself. Her eyes filled again, but this time not just from pain. What would it mean, she whispered. 1 year, he replied. 1 marriage, separate lives, full freedom. But today, you walk down that aisle with your head held high. She didn't answer, not with words. Instead, she reached out, opened the velvet box and took the ring. Her fingers trembled as he slid it onto her hand, silently. No kiss, no romantic gesture, just a quiet understanding between two people bound by shattered expectations and unexpected choices. And when the doors of the chapel opened minutes later and Emily Parker walked in on Nathan Bennett's arm, the entire room gasped. Because the groom had changed, but not her courage. And as they stood before the minister, Emily couldn't stop wondering, what have I just done? The elevator ascended quietly, its glass walls revealing the sparkling Manhattan skyline at dusk. Emily stood beside him, her hands still marked by the imprint of the ring he had placed on her finger just hours ago. It felt both foreign and heavy, a symbol of something that wasn't love, but also wasn't cruelty. Something in between. Nathan hadn't said much after the ceremony, not in the car, not during the polite reception where guests murmured behind champagne flutes and speculated in hushed tones, not when the press quietly snapped pictures from a distance, unsure how to frame what had just happened. He had simply guided her, calm, composed, unreadable, into his black car and now into his penthouse, 38 floors above a city that no longer felt familiar. As the elevator doors opened, Emily's breath caught. The space was breathtaking. Glass walls framed the city lights, casting long reflections across marble floors and warm wood. Minimalist furniture, neutral colors, carefully placed art, a home that felt curated but not cold. A fireplace flickered gently on the far wall, painting soft shadows across the room. Nathan gestured toward a side corridor. That's your room. First door on the right. It's fully furnished. You can redecorate however you like. Emily nodded once, her heels silent on the polished floor. She stepped inside cautiously and found herself in a large bedroom wrapped in warm earth tones. A bed with crisp linens, bookshelves already half filled, a window seat, a small bouquet of lilies on the nightstand. She closed the door halfway, then turned back to face him in the hallway. This isn't what I expected. I didn't want you to feel like a guest, he said. But I am, she murmured. In your world, in your life. His gaze held hers. No. You're my wife now. The word felt strange. Final. Emily leaned against the doorframe. Why did you really do it, Nathan? He didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water. No wine, no celebration, just water, as if to ground the moment. I told you, he said, as he handed her a glass. I don't believe in letting someone fall without offering them something to hold on to. And what am I holding on to here? She asked softly. A year, he said. 1 year of structure, stability. No expectations beyond what we agree on tonight. She exhaled, eyes narrowing. You want to formalize this? He nodded. A contract for clarity, for boundaries. Emily followed him into the sitting room, her bare shoulders chilled by the air conditioning. He picked up a leather-bound folder from the table and opened it. Read it, he said. The terms were clear, no physical intimacy, separate rooms, mutual respect. She could continue her work as an artist without restriction. He would provide for her living expenses, invest in a studio space for her, and in return she would fulfill the role of his wife in public, attending functions, handling press inquiries, playing the part. Emily ran her fingers along the page. You thought of everything. I don't do improvisation, he said simply. It's easier to avoid hurt when you plan ahead. She glanced up. You think we're going to hurt each other? I think it's best to assume nothing, he said. There was no malice in his tone, just the kind of distance people build after being burned one too many times. Emily set the folder down. And after 1 year? We part ways, he said. Quietly, privately, with dignity. A long silence passed between them, the kind that stretches when neither person is sure if the bridge between them should be built or burned. And what about feelings? She asked. He looked at her then, really looked at her. And for the first time something flickered in his expression. Regret? Longing? She couldn't tell. Feelings are unpredictable, he said. That's why we set terms. Her heart sank a little, even though she didn't know why. Maybe because a small, foolish part of her had imagined that this man, this stranger who stepped in when the world collapsed, might be capable of something more. Emily stood. I'll sign it, but I want one condition of my own. Nathan arched a brow. Which is? I want my own studio, not just a corner in this apartment. I want a separate place with a key that's mine alone. He nodded once. Done. And I want full creative control. You don't interfere, no critiques, no influence. You're an artist, he said. Not an employee, I wouldn't dare. Her lips twitched, almost a smile. Also, she added, don't look over my shoulder when I paint. Ever. He tilted his head. Are you that private? No, she said, holding his gaze. I'm that vulnerable. The truth hung between them, heavy and raw. Nathan offered a pen. She hesitated only a moment before taking it and signing her name. The name she had now, Emily Bennett. Strange, official, unfamiliar on her own tongue. As she handed the pen back, their fingers brushed. It was nothing more than a second, skin against skin, but it felt like a tremor passed through her, a silence that said more than words could reach. Nathan cleared his throat and stepped back. You'll find your closet already stocked, he said. I had someone collect your things from your old apartment. If there's anything missing, just let me know. Emily blinked. You did that. Today. He nodded. This morning. She studied him for a long moment. You were planning this? No, he replied. I was preparing, in case Lucas did exactly what I thought he would. The cold truth hit her like wind on bare skin. So you knew. I suspected, he said. But I hoped I was wrong. She walked back toward her room, her fingers brushing the doorframe. Nathan? Yes? Do you always protect people like this? He looked at her, unreadable once more. Only when I can't bear to watch them fall. She nodded slowly, then turned and entered her room, closing the door behind her. The soft click echoed louder than it should have. Alone now, she stared at the pearl earrings on the nightstand and tried to remember how she got from the chapel to here. From heartbreak to a signature. From promises of love to a contract of survival. And yet, as she laid down that night in silk sheets and unfamiliar silence, a thought tugged at her. What if this wasn't a rescue, but the beginning of something neither of them were ready for? Morning sunlight poured into the penthouse like a quiet intruder, brushing against the hardwood floors and catching dust particles in its golden path. Emily blinked awake to unfamiliar softness. The sheets, the silence, the way the air carried no sound of traffic. The ceiling above her was smooth and white, like an untouched canvas. For a moment, she lay there, listening to her own breath, wondering if everything had been a strange, surreal dream. But it hadn't. The ring on her finger, heavy and cold, confirmed that. She had married Nathan Bennett, and now she lived here. Wrapped in a silk robe, she padded quietly through the hallway, her bare feet silent against the wood. The scent of fresh coffee reached her before she saw him. Nathan stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, already dressed in his usual crisp black shirt and slacks. He looked like a portrait, composed, precise, effortless. He didn't turn as she entered. He just spoke softly, as if sensing her presence. "There's coffee," And almond croissants. I had them brought in from that bakery you like on 74th. Emily blinked, surprised. I never told you I liked that place. I noticed, he said simply. You always stop there when you walk to the art supply store. A beat passed. You've been watching me for a while, haven't you? He met her gaze then. Steady, unflinching. Not watching. Just noticing. Emily didn't reply. Instead, she walked over and poured herself a cup of coffee, the aroma rich and familiar. The cup was warm in her hands, grounding. She took a sip and let the silence settle, no longer awkward, just there. Their days began to take on a quiet rhythm, separate but not distant. Nathan left early most mornings, always in a suit, always with a brief nod and a good luck with your painting. Emily appreciated that he didn't try to make small talk or hover. He was present without invading, a contrast to the performative attention she was used to with Lucas. Her studio, located just 2 blocks away, was more than she could have asked for. A sun-drenched loft with floor-to-ceiling windows, raw brick walls, and a wide open space that smelled faintly of paint and wood. And waiting for her on the center easel, wrapped in brown paper, was a note. For your first day, let it be messy. N. She smiled despite herself. The first few paintings were hesitant, like her heart. Colors clashed, strokes missed, emotions blurred. But day after day the rhythm returned. Her fingers remembered what her soul almost forgot, how to feel without apology. At night, she returned to the penthouse, sometimes greeted by the sound of piano music drifting from the living room. She had never imagined Nathan as someone who played, let alone with such quiet emotion. He never spoke of it, never played for her, just for the room, the silence, the space between them. Sometimes they shared dinner, casual, simple. I read your article in Art and Form last year, he said once over grilled salmon. You argued that abstraction is just grief with a brush. Emily raised an eyebrow. You read Art and Form. I like to understand the things I invest in, he replied, without flinching. Is that what I am? An investment? He set his fork down and looked at her. Your potential, and I don't mean in the business sense. Her heart fluttered, confused, conflicted, curious. Some evenings he lingered by her studio when she brought her canvas home. He never entered, just paused near the doorway, glanced at the colors, and said something that didn't feel like praise, but something softer, something real. You changed your palette this week. It felt like the blue was lying. He nodded as if he understood that. And maybe, impossibly, he did. One night, while walking through the penthouse with a glass of red wine in hand, she found a room she hadn't noticed before. The door was slightly ajar. Inside was a gallery, not a literal one, a private one, his. Dozens of her paintings lined the walls, from years ago. Pieces she had thought were lost. Pieces sold under pseudonyms, gifted at galleries, discarded in the chaos of her early career. She turned slowly, stunned. You kept them. Nathan's voice came from the doorway. I didn't keep them. I searched for them. She looked at him, overwhelmed. Why? Because they said what you couldn't yet say out loud. And I needed to hear it. Emily felt her chest tighten. That's not admiration, Nathan, that's obsession. No, he said, stepping into the room. Obsession is selfish. This was reverence. Silence filled the space between them, thick as oil paint on canvas. I didn't know, she whispered. I never intended to tell you, he said, but now you're here, and I thought you deserved to see what you built, before anyone else ever did. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Instead, she turned back to the paintings. I don't know who you are yet, she said softly, but for the first time, I think you might be more than the shadow of your brother. Nathan didn't move. And you are far more than the woman he left behind. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay awake, listening to the sound of rain tapping against the windows, her thoughts spinning like brushes dipped in colors she didn't have names for. Part of her wanted to run, to flee from the confusion, the vulnerability, but another part, smaller but louder, told her to stay. Because for the first time since her life had collapsed in that chapel, she didn't feel pitied. She felt seen. And that terrified her more than anything else. The lake house was nothing like she'd imagined. Emily had expected something sleek, cold, another glass and steel monument to Nathan's wealth and detachment. But what rose before her that Friday evening was a cabin made of dark cedar, with ivy creeping along the corners and wide windows that reflected the surrounding trees. The air smelled of pine and earth, and the silence felt sacred. Nathan didn't say much on the drive up. He simply told her he needed to get away for a few days, that the markets were volatile, the press relentless, and he wanted quiet. She had agreed, unsure if he meant for her to come or was just informing her of his own absence. But then he'd sent a car, packed a bag for her, left a note on the seat. "Bring your brushes." Now, standing at the edge of the lake with her boots half sunk in wet soil, Emily exhaled for the first time in days. Inside, the house was warm. Wooden beams stretched across the ceiling like open arms. A fire crackled in the stone hearth. Books lined uneven shelves. There was even a worn quilt thrown over the back of the couch, a small human imperfection she never would have associated with Nathan. He made no speeches, no comments about work or schedules. Instead, he handed her a mug of tea and simply said, "There's soup on the stove, towels in the linen closet. The studio's in the back and thought you might want your own space." Emily didn't answer. She just nodded and let the warmth of the tea melt the tension in her shoulders. The rain came that night. Not the soft kind, but a steady rhythmic storm that pounded on the windows and wrapped the cabin in its own private cocoon. Emily stood barefoot in the small back studio, staring at the blank canvas he'd set up for her. Her fingers itched. The storm outside whispered things no words could hold. She dipped her brush in a deep crimson and let it bleed across the surface. Hours passed. She didn't notice. At some point, he brought her another cup of tea. He didn't speak, didn't watch her paint, just left it by the windowsill and walked away. It was the first time someone had given her space without asking for something in return. The next morning, they ate breakfast in silence, but it was a different kind of quiet, not awkward, not forced, just comfortable. Nathan sipped his coffee while flipping through a worn copy of The Old Man and the Sea. Emily sketched his profile without thinking, the way his brow furrowed slightly when he read, the faint scar near his temple she hadn't noticed before. Later, they walked the edge of the lake together, boots crunching against wet leaves, mist rising from the water like a secret. Nathan told her about the time he fell through ice here when he was 10, how his father hadn't noticed he was missing for hours, how Lucas had pulled him out. "I think that's the last time I ever saw him afraid," Nathan said. Emily looked at him. "And you?" He shrugged. "I stopped letting myself feel fear after that. It's inconvenient." She wanted to tell him that fear wasn't weakness, that it was human. But she sensed that he already knew, he just didn't allow himself the luxury. Back at the house, she found an old deck of cards and challenged him to a game. They played by the fire, their laughter quiet but real. She teased him when he lost. He didn't defend himself, just smiled. It was the first time she saw his face soften completely. That night, the storm returned, and so did the silence. Emily stood in the hallway outside her bedroom, fingers resting on the doorframe. Nathan stood at the other end, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his shirt half unbuttoned, collar loose. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then she spoke. "Did you mean what you said? That this marriage was only structure, a shield?" He didn't answer immediately. "I meant it then," he said. "I'm not sure if I still do." She took a step toward him. "Why?" "Because when I see you now," he said slowly, "I don't just see someone I protected. I see someone I want to understand." Emily's breath caught. "I'm still a mess," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm still hurting." "I know. I don't know if I trust you. I don't expect you to." "I might run," she added, her throat tight. "Then I'll wait," he said. A silence deeper than the storm passed between them. And then, without warning, she walked toward him step by step until they were close enough to feel the heat between their skin. He didn't move, didn't reach for her. He just waited. When her fingers touched the open collar of his shirt, he inhaled sharply. "I don't know what this is," she murmured. "Neither do I," he said. But then his hands were on her waist, tentative, reverent, as if he feared she'd disappear, and she leaned in, her lips brushing his with a softness that held both question and answer. It wasn't hunger. It wasn't fire. It was something quieter, something sacred. They didn't rush. They didn't speak. They simply let the storm outside echo the one unfolding between them, slow, inevitable, and beautifully out of their control. Later, she lay beside him, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of a heart she no longer feared. And for the first time since that wedding day, she no longer felt like someone who had been chosen out of pity. She felt like someone truly seen. And yet, just before she drifted off, one quiet thought crept in. What happens when the storm passes and real life returns? The city welcomed them back with noise. The sharp kind, horns blaring, sirens whining in the distance, footsteps hurried against pavement. It was jarring after days of silence, of slow mornings and fire-warmed nights. Emily stood by the penthouse window that first evening, her arms wrapped around herself, watching the city blink back at her. It felt like waking from a dream and finding the bed cold. Nathan hadn't said much on the drive back. He'd answered a few business calls, nodded to her when she glanced his way, and offered a soft, "We'll be home in 30" when the skyline appeared. But beyond that, the quiet between them had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was cautious. She had felt something shift in the lake house, something real, the way he had touched her, not like a man claiming, but like someone finally letting go. And she had let herself be held, not just physically, but emotionally. But now back here, the walls felt thicker, the air colder. When she stepped into her studio the next morning, the scent of fresh lilies hit her first. Then she saw the bouquet on the center table, vibrant, extravagant, and familiar. Her heart dropped. The card was unsigned, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Lucas, I never stopped thinking about you. I'm sorry. Please, give me a chance to explain. She stared at the words, her breath catching. Her first instinct was to throw it away. But her fingers lingered, because even now, even after all this, there were questions. Why had he left? What had really happened that morning? Had he ever meant to stay? Behind her, the elevator doors slid open, soft but not soft enough. Nathan's voice broke the silence. He's reaching out. Emily turned slowly. You knew? I assumed he would. Her voice was tight. Did you know he'd send flowers? No, but I'm not surprised. Nathan stepped into the room, his expression unreadable. He looked at the bouquet, then at her, not with anger, but with something more dangerous. Distance. She hated it. I didn't ask for this, she said. I know. Do you? She challenged, the tension in her chest rising. Because it feels like you've already decided I'm torn. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the window and stared out. When people come back from war, he said slowly, they often look for something familiar, even if it's what broke them. She flinched. So I'm a trauma response? He turned to her then, finally, his eyes sharp. No, you're the one who stayed, that's the difference. A beat. But if you're still looking over your shoulder, Emily, I need to know. The air between them crackled. I'm not, she said. I didn't expect it. That's all. Nathan nodded once. Too quickly. Then he left. The door clicked shut behind him. She stood there for a long time, unsure whether to scream, cry, or paint, until her arms gave out. Instead, she opened a drawer, shoved the card inside, and told herself it meant nothing. But the seed had been planted, and Nathan, always so composed, began to change. Over the next few days, he grew quieter. Not in the way he used to be, but in a way that felt like retreat. He came home later, sat farther away at dinner, answered her questions with fewer words. When she asked if he wanted to come to her gallery preview night, he simply said, I have a board dinner. She didn't believe him. That night she stood in the gallery alone, surrounded by her work, by strangers praising her brushstrokes and her use of space. But the only space she noticed was the one beside her. Empty. A man she didn't recognize approached her near the end. Sharp suit, polished smile. Emily Bennett, he said, even more stunning than your work. She forced a polite smile. "Thank you. I'm a friend of Lucas's," he added. Her smile froze. "He speaks of you often. Said you were stolen." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "He said his brother manipulated the entire situation, that he paid him to disappear only to step in and take what wasn't his." The words hit her like a slap. "I think you should leave," she said coldly. He smirked. "Touch a nerve." Before she could answer, security had already approached, but the damage was done. That night, Emily confronted Nathan. He was in his office, sleeves rolled, eyes dark from too many hours and too little sleep. "Did you pay him to leave, Gamad?" she asked, her voice shaking. Nathan looked up slowly. "What?" "Lucas. Did you pay him to disappear?" The pause was long, too long. "I didn't," he said finally. "But someone did." "Who?" He stood, walked past her, poured a drink. His back was to her when he spoke. "My father." Emily felt like the floor moved. "Why?" "Because he didn't think Lucas was strong enough to marry you, and because he didn't think you were real." "And you knew?" she whispered. "I suspected," he said, "but I couldn't prove it until now." Emily stepped back, her chest tight. "So I was a prize?" "No," Nathan said, finally facing her. "You were a target." The words gutted her, and yet something else stirred inside her, deeper than the pain. "What are we, Nathan?" she asked. "Still married on paper or something else?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked past her, quietly. And for the first time since the lake house, he didn't look back. The first time Emily saw her, she thought she was imagining things. It was a Wednesday morning, one of those crisp autumn days when the city felt cleaner than usual. Emily had just left her studio, a sketchpad tucked beneath her arm, when a soft voice called her name. "Emily Bennett." She turned and froze. The woman approaching her was effortlessly elegant. Silk coat, heels that clicked with authority, sunglasses perched high, though the sun was barely out. Her walk wasn't fast. It was calculated. Every step choreographed. Emily knew who she was before she introduced herself. "Sophia Munro," the woman said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I've heard so much about you." Emily shook her hand slowly. "Can't say the same." Sophia smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Of course not. Nathan's never been one for nostalgia. But people like us, we leave imprints, don't we?" There it was. The first crack. Subtle, polite, but unmistakably sharp. Emily straightened her shoulders. "Is there a reason you stopped me in the middle of the street?" Sophia tilted her head. "Curiosity and concern." She stepped closer. "You do know your marriage isn't exactly traditional." Emily's stomach tightened. "It's none of your concern." "Oh, sweetheart," Sophia said, voice like velvet. "I was his concern for years. You think I don't recognize when he's playing a part?" Emily's pulse quickened. "If you're done, I have things to do." "Just be careful," Sophia whispered. "Men like Nathan, they build walls for a reason, and sometimes the one on the inside gets trapped, not protected." She walked away without waiting for a reply, her perfume lingering like smoke after a fire. Emily stood frozen, every nerve on edge. She wanted to dismiss it, to laugh. But something about Sophia's calm confidence dug under her skin. That evening, Nathan wasn't home. No message, no update. And for the first time, the penthouse felt unfamiliar again. She wandered into the kitchen, her appetite gone, and found a note near the espresso machine. "Late dinner. Don't wait up. N." No warmth, no explanation. The next day, Sophia showed up again, this time at Emily's gallery. "I thought I'd see your work firsthand," she said, stepping around the space like she owned it. "Nathan used to talk about your paintings before he ever met you. Funny, right?" Emily clenched her jaw. "What do you want?" Sophia picked up a small canvas. "Do you know how many women he's admired from afar, observed, collected, until they became inconvenient? Get out." Sophia set the painting down gently. "I'm just saying, admiration and obsession wear the same perfume. You'd be wise to learn the difference." Emily didn't respond. She didn't have to. Her silence was the only line she could still draw. but the damage was done. That night, Lucas called. She didn't want to answer. She really didn't. But curiosity got the better of her. That, and the silence Nathan had wrapped around their home like a second skin. "Emily," Lucas said, his voice softer than she remembered, "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Didn't you?" she asked flatly. "I never would have left if I hadn't been pushed to." She gripped the phone tighter. "Your father, and Nathan," he said quietly. "Don't let him fool you. He's not as noble as he pretends." She wanted to hang up, but she didn't. "He's been obsessed with you for years," Lucas continued. "Even before we met. The paintings, the gallery contracts, the apartment he helped you get when you thought it was anonymous funding. That was him. All of it." Emily's breath caught. "You're lying." "I wish I were." "Why tell me this now?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Because you deserve to know what you're in," he said. "And because I still love you." She hung up, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. The next day, Nathan returned earlier than usual. He looked tired but calm, too calm. "Everything okay?" he asked, taking off his coat. Emily watched him, studied him. "Do you ever wonder what it means to fall for someone before you meet them?" He turned, surprised. "What are you talking about?" She didn't answer, just walked into her studio and closed the door. Inside, she opened an old storage cabinet and pulled out one of her earliest paintings. A portrait, blurred, abstract, masculine. She'd painted it years ago without thinking. Now looking at it, she realized something terrifying. It looked like Nathan, the angles, the shadows, the eyes. She stared at it for a long time, then whispered to herself, "What if I was never free to choose?" The studio was dim, lit only by the late afternoon sun pouring through the windows in quiet streaks. Dust floated in the air, undisturbed, like memories refusing to settle. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, the abstract portrait of Nathan resting beside her. Her fingers traced the brushstrokes slowly, as if the texture could answer the questions tormenting her. She had painted it 3 years ago, long before she'd ever met him. But now she couldn't unsee the truth, the angle of the jaw, the cold strength in the eyes, the haunted mouth. Her subconscious had known him before her heart did. Or maybe someone else had known her better than she ever realized. The knock came softly. Once, twice. She didn't move. Nathan stepped into the room, his frame tall against the fading light. He looked at her, sitting on the floor with the canvas like a secret laid bare, and something in his expression shifted. "You found it," he said quietly. She didn't look up. "How long have you been watching me?" A pause. "Emily, don't lie," she cut him off. Her voice wasn't angry. It was worse than that. It was calm, detached. "Please, not now." Nathan stepped closer, but still kept a distance. "Years," he said. "Before Lucas, before the galleries, before you even knew someone like me existed." "Why?" she asked, finally lifting her gaze. Her eyes were red but dry. "Why me?" He knelt across from her, his voice low. "Because when I saw your first piece at that street exhibit, I couldn't look away. There was something broken in it. Beautiful. Defiant. It looked like someone had taken grief and turned it into grace. And I recognized it." Emily exhaled, slow and shaky. "So you followed me?" "I didn't follow," he said. "I protected, I invested, quietly, without my permission. I didn't want you to feel obligated." She laughed, short and sharp. "That's exactly what I feel now." He winced. "I thought I was finding my own way," she whispered. "I thought the scholarships, the gallery interest, the studio offers, I thought it was me. But it was you." "No," he said. "It was always you. I just moved the obstacles." Emily stood slowly, her arms crossed over her chest. "And marrying me, that was just the next step in your project." His eyes darkened. "Don't say that." "Why not? It feels true. I didn't plan the wedding. I didn't want it to happen like that." "But you were ready," she said bitterly. "Ring in your pocket, contract printed, studio furnished." "What does that tell me?" Nathan stood too, now face to face with her. "It tells you that I couldn't bear to watch you be humiliated." She stepped back. "It tells me you were waiting for him to fail, And when he did, you stepped in, not out of love, but out of control. Silence pulsed between them. And then she asked the question that had haunted her since Lucas's call. Did you pay him to leave? Nathan flinched. No, but I didn't stop it either. That was enough. She nodded, a quiet gesture of finality. Her shoulders sagged, but her voice was steady. I need space. Nathan's jaw tensed. Emily, I need air that isn't filtered through you, she said. I need to know who I am, without your hand behind every curtain. His silence gave her the answer she feared. He couldn't offer that. So she packed, not with fury, not with tears, just the numb rhythm of someone who had given too much of herself to shadows. She returned to Brooklyn, to her grandmother's old house. The walls still smelled of lavender and oil paint. The windows creaked when opened. The plumbing groaned like an old man waking, but it was hers, and no one had ever bought it for her. No silent hands had shaped this space. It was flawed, but it was real. She stood in the small bedroom that night, wrapped in a faded sweater, staring at her bare ring finger. The absence stung in ways she hadn't expected, not because she missed the luxury, but because a part of her had wanted to believe it had been real, that someone like Nathan Bennett could love someone like her, not as a savior, but as a man. A knock came 3 days later. She expected Nathan, but it was someone else, Richard Bennett, her father-in-law. He stood on the porch in a tailored coat, hands gloved, expression unreadable. I was hoping we could talk, he said. Emily let him in, out of curiosity, out of exhaustion, out of some strange ache for truth. He sat at the kitchen table like he had done this 1,000 times, though it was their first real conversation. I underestimated you, he said. I'm not interested in your opinion. That's fair, he nodded, but you deserve the truth. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, leather-bound journal, set it on the table. Nathan's name was embossed on the front. Emily frowned. What is this? His, Richard said. He's kept journals since he was 16. This one, it's about you. I don't want... You should read it, he interrupted gently, before you decide who he really is. Emily stared at the journal, afraid to touch it. But part of her, the part that still remembered the way he looked at her in the firelight, needed to know. Richard stood to leave. At the door, he paused. I did pay Lucas to walk away, he said. Not Nathan, me. I thought you were after the family's money. And Nathan, he begged me not to interfere, but I didn't listen. He left before she could respond. The house fell quiet again. Emily sat with the journal in her lap for a long time. Then, slowly, she opened it. The first page was dated 2 years ago. I saw her again today, same cafe, same sketchbook. She doesn't see how the world bends around her. That's what makes her dangerous and beautiful. She flipped to another page. Lucas is talking about proposing. I want to scream, but I won't. She doesn't belong to anyone, especially not to me. Another, she paints with grief, and still somehow finds color. I wish I had known someone like her when my mother died. Maybe I wouldn't have built so many walls. Emily closed the journal, her hands shaking. The words had no agenda, no polish. They were raw, messy, human. And suddenly, everything she thought she knew cracked open. Because maybe it hadn't been manipulation. Maybe it had been love, just the kind that's been waiting in silence for far too long. The journal sat on the table like something alive. Not just ink and paper, but breath, memory. A map of a man who had never known how to say what he felt out loud. Emily hadn't opened it again in nearly 24 hours. She was afraid. Afraid of what she would feel. Afraid of what it would undo. But that morning, with the sound of church bells faint in the distance and sunlight filtering through linen curtains, she sat at her grandmother's old table and turned the pages. Each entry pulled her deeper. There were no elaborate metaphors, no declarations of obsession, just pieces of Nathan. Observations, frustrations, questions he never dared ask aloud. I wonder what it's like to be chosen without needing to prove your worth. Today she dropped a pencil and laughed like the world hadn't failed her. I don't know how she does that. Lucas thinks he loves her, but he only loves what she makes him feel, needed, seen. I love her differently. I love her when she's alone. Emily pressed her hand to her chest, trying to quiet the ache there. These weren't the words of a puppeteer. They were the quiet confessions of a man who had only ever known how to love in silence. And she had been blind to it. Because she'd been hurt. Because she'd believed the whispers, the doubts, the manipulations of others. And never once had she asked Nathan what it cost him to stay in the background all those years. She turned another page. I tried to move on. I tried to forget her. Dated Sophia. Buried myself in work. But nothing fills the space she left just by existing. Her breath hitched. Sometimes I think she was never meant to notice me. That I was only ever meant to protect her. Quietly. And that loving her was the closest I'd ever get to being known. Emily closed the journal and buried her face in her hands. This wasn't about control. It had never been about power. Nathan hadn't stolen her future. He had preserved it gently, painfully, waiting for her to see him not as the shadow behind Lucas, but as the man who had been there all along. And she had left him standing in silence. Later that afternoon, she walked the streets of Brooklyn, notebook in hand, trying to make sense of what she felt. She passed the old coffee shop where she'd spent afternoons sketching, unaware that he might have been near. She passed the bench where she once sold her first painting to a stranger who she now realized might not have been a stranger at all. Everything she had thought was coincidence had been care. Every door that had opened had a quiet hand behind it, not to own her, but to lift her. When she returned home, she found a package on the front steps. No name, no sender, just a brown box tied with a navy ribbon. Inside she found her old sketchbook, the one she'd lost 2 years ago during a gallery move, the one she'd cried over. Thought gone forever. There was a note. I've kept it safe, because everything you draw feels like something I was never brave enough to say. N. Her hands trembled. She clutched the sketchbook to her chest, as if trying to protect it from the weight of her own guilt. Then she whispered, more to herself than to the room, "What have I done?" That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She stood at the window, watching the lights flicker in distant buildings. She imagined Nathan in his penthouse alone, maybe reading, maybe staring at the same sky, wondering if she hated him, wondering if she had forgotten what they shared in that lake house. She hadn't. She could still feel his touch, and not just on her skin but in her memories, in the way he'd poured her tea without asking how she liked it, in the way he never stepped into her studio unless invited, in the way he saw her without noise, without demand. And now she knew. He had never wanted to trap her. He had only ever wanted to make sure she never had to fight alone. The next morning she called her lawyer. "I want the apartment back. Mrs. Bennett. I want to go home." Home. It felt strange to say it, because she had never thought of that place as hers. But now, knowing what she knew, it wasn't about the penthouse. It was about him. Later that afternoon, she returned. Not with flowers, not with apologies rehearsed, just herself. The elevator ride felt endless. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Her hand trembled as she knocked once, then opened the door with the key she still hadn't returned. He wasn't in the foyer, or the living room, but the soft sound of piano drifted from the study. She followed it, and there he was. Nathan sat in his usual black shirt, sleeves rolled up, playing something slow and sad. His back was to her. He didn't stop playing when she stepped inside, didn't speak. She stood there listening, letting the music say everything they hadn't. When he finally finished, he rested his hands on the keys and said, without turning around, "I didn't think you'd come back." "I almost didn't," she replied. His voice was low. "Was it the journal?" "Yes," she said honestly. "But not just that." Silence. "I was angry," she continued. "Confused. I thought I'd been manipulated. But the truth is, I never asked you for yours. I never gave you the chance to explain." He stood slowly, turned to face her. His eyes were tired, guarded. "I didn't know how to explain it." "I know," she whispered, "because I didn't know how to hear it." He took a step toward her. "Are you here to say goodbye?" She shook her head. "No," she said. "I'm here to ask if you'll let me start again. Not as a favor, not as a contract, but as someone who's finally ready to see you." Nathan didn't speak. He just stepped forward, gently took her hand and pressed it to his chest. "I've waited a long time for you to come back," he whispered, "but not to this place. To me." And she did. She leaned into him, not out of guilt or confusion, but out of something new. Clarity. Because for the first time since their wedding day, she finally knew what it meant to choose him back. The invitation lay open on the vanity like a dare. The Chandler Foundation Gala, black tie, guest list sealed in gold foil, the kind of event where names weren't just introduced, they were whispered. Emily stared at it in silence. She hadn't RSVP'd, hadn't planned to go. But then again, she hadn't planned any of this. She glanced at the mirror. The reflection looking back at her was no longer the girl in the ivory gown abandoned at the altar. She was something else now. Not harder, but steadier. And maybe it was time the world saw that too. She chose a dress unlike any she'd ever worn. Deep sapphire, form-fitting, with a low back and long sleeves that whispered with every step. Her hair swept up, a few strands loose by design, not by accident. Around her neck, a single gold chain. Elegant. Deliberate. The car waiting downstairs was discreet, the kind Nathan always sent. But tonight, she hadn't told him. He didn't know she was coming. Let him be surprised. Let them all be. The moment she stepped into the ballroom, the air changed. She felt it, like electricity in velvet. Heads turned, conversations paused, phones tilted discreetly to capture the moment. She walked alone, chin high, each step echoing like punctuation against the polished marble floor. And then she saw him. Nathan stood near the center of the room, surrounded by donors, associates, a few familiar faces from the board. His tuxedo was flawless, his posture impeccable, but there was something in his eyes, distant, watchful, tired. She hadn't seen that look since before the lake house, and when his eyes finally found her across the room, the stillness in him shattered. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away. She walked toward him, slowly, with purpose, letting the weight of every step carry the words she hadn't said yet. Someone near him, a woman in pearls, leaned in and whispered, "Is that her?" Emily reached the edge of the circle. Conversations halted. She turned to Lucas first. Yes, he was there. Of course he was. He wore his charm like armor, a glass of champagne in hand, the same polished smirk he'd worn on their engagement night. "Lucas," she said evenly. "Emily." He tilted his glass slightly. "You look stunning. I take it you got the flowers." "I did." "And the message?" She smiled. "I did." He took a step closer. "Then, maybe, I came here to return them." His smile faltered. She didn't lower her voice. "You told me Nathan manipulated everything, that I was just a piece on his board. But I've read the truth now. I've seen it in his words, in his silence, in the way he never once asked me to choose him." Her voice carried through the room, steady, clear. "You left because someone paid you to disappear. He stayed knowing I might never love him, that I might never even look at him." She turned to the crowd, to the whispers, the doubts, the questions. "I married a man I didn't know, but I fell in love with the man he never forced me to see, the one who protected my name, my art, my soul, when no one else did." The room was silent. Lucas's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. And then she turned to Nathan. He hadn't moved, not a step. His eyes held everything, shock, disbelief, and a flicker of something he hadn't allowed himself to hope for. Emily stepped into the quiet space between them. She reached for his hand, held it, and said softly but with certainty, "I choose you. Not because I have to, not because I'm afraid, but because I finally see you. And I've never felt safer in the light." For a long, suspended moment, no one breathed. Then Nathan did something he hadn't done in public for years. He smiled. The kind of smile that stripped away power, wealth, performance. The kind of smile that belonged to no one else but her. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed it gently. Then he pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other cradling the back of her neck. They didn't care who watched, not anymore, because in that moment, the only thing that existed was what had taken root in silence, now finally spoken aloud. Later that evening, as they stood near the terrace overlooking the city, Emily leaned against his shoulder and whispered, "Do you forgive me for not knowing sooner?" Nathan didn't answer right away. He turned to her, eyes soft. "I've waited years," he said. "I would have waited a lifetime." And just before the music started again, he added, "But I'm so glad I don't have to." The apartment no longer felt like his. It felt like theirs. The shift was subtle at first, her shoes beside the door instead of tucked away, a mug she favored always drying near the sink, the scent of orange blossom drifting from the bedroom in the early mornings. But deeper than those things, something else had changed. The silence between them no longer echoed. It rested. Gone were the polite boundaries, the layers of detachment. What remained were questions asked over breakfast without fear, glances held a little longer in the hallway, hands that reached out not out of obligation, but instinct. Emily stood in the middle of the studio Nathan had built for her, now splattered with paint, life, and laughter. The white walls were covered with canvases in every stage, some near completion, others just born. She wore a linen shirt stolen from his closet, sleeves rolled to her elbows, her hands streaked with burnt sienna. Outside the window, Manhattan hummed like a lullaby. Behind her, Nathan appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand. "I haven't seen you paint like this in weeks," he said, watching her with that calm, steady gaze that still made her chest tighten, not with fear, but with something warmer. "Because I haven't felt like this in weeks," she replied. "Like what?" "Free." She turned toward him. "And in love." His smile deepened. "Good. I was starting to worry you might forget." "I don't forget things that matter." He walked closer, kissed the top of her paint-stained head, and handed her the coffee. "Have you thought of a name yet?" he asked. "For the gallery," she nodded. "Opening night's only 2 weeks away." Emily smiled to herself. "Thompson Gallery, after my grandmother." Nathan's eyebrows lifted, surprised. "Not your own name?" "She's the reason I ever picked up a brush," Emily said softly. "Naming it after her feels like honoring where I came from." Nathan nodded. "She'd be proud." "I hope so." Emily sipped her coffee, staring out at the skyline. "You're not funding it anymore, by the way." That made him laugh, a low, real sound that curled around her heart like smoke. "Oh?" "I'm paying you back. Every cent. I want this to be mine." Nathan tilted his head. "As long as I can still be your favorite investor." She looked at him over her shoulder. "You're more than that." Later that afternoon, they stood in the gallery space together, still under construction, but pulsing with potential. Workers moved around them, hanging lights, checking sound systems, polishing windows. Emily walked slowly across the floor, barefoot, imagining how the space would feel filled with art and strangers and music. Nathan followed her, but didn't speak. He watched, and when she turned to him, eyes full of both joy and nerves, he simply said, "It's going to be beautiful," she exhaled. "Do you ever get scared it'll all fall apart?" "All the time," he said, "but not this." "Why not?" "Because this time," he said, reaching for her hand, "we're not hiding behind contracts or silence." Emily leaned her head against his shoulder. For the first time in months, her world felt still, not frozen, but anchored. In the weeks that followed, they fell into a rhythm that neither of them rushed to define. They had breakfast together, sometimes in silence, sometimes with laughter. They kissed in elevators when no one was looking. They danced barefoot in the kitchen to old jazz records. She painted without asking if he approved. He worked late some nights, but always called when he'd be late. They didn't need to ask where the other stood. They just knew. And more than anything, there was space. Room to breathe, to become. One afternoon, Nathan found her curled on the couch, sketchbook in hand, deep in thought. He sat beside her, and without a word, she handed it to him. He turned the pages slowly. Portraits of strangers, moments from the city, quick lines that looked like movement, like memory. And finally, a sketch of him. Not posed, not polished, just him. Flawed, open, real. He closed the book gently. "You see me better than I see myself," he said. Emily smiled. "No, I just see you without trying to change you." That night they lay tangled in bed, the city lights painting soft gold across their skin. He touched her face slowly, as if relearning her all over again. "I used to believe people like me didn't get this," he said. "This. Peace," he whispered. "A home that doesn't feel like a fortress. A woman who doesn't need me to be a hero, just someone she trusts enough to come back to." Emily rested her palm over his chest. "You're not perfect, Nathan. And neither am I. But love isn't about saving each other. It's about choosing each other every day." He closed his eyes, letting that truth settle. And then, quietly, almost to himself, he whispered, "I choose you. Still." She didn't say anything in return. She just pulled him closer and let the silence speak. It started with a leak, anonymous, untraceable. A file of emails dumped onto a popular business forum, shared by someone calling themselves Truth Beneath the Vow. Subject lines in bold: strategic marriage proposal. Mitigating Lucas's scandal. Reputation preservation through union. Within hours, it had gone viral. Emily woke to a phone vibrating endlessly on the nightstand, missed calls from her agent, 2 voicemails from gallery sponsors, and 1 text from her mother. "Emily, please tell me it's not true." She sat up slowly, blinking at the screen, her pulse already racing. Nathan was still asleep beside her, one arm resting across her waist, peaceful, unaware. She hesitated, then opened the browser. There it was. Screenshots, emails, speculation, all of it twisted, taken out of context, but enough to raise doubts in anyone who wanted to believe the worst. The headlines burned. Marriage for image? Billionaire's emails spark uproar. Was Emily Parker just a pawn? Bennett empire built on secrets? She felt like the floor had been pulled out from under her, not because she believed it, but because the rest of the world would. Nathan stirred, and when he opened his eyes and saw her face, everything changed. He sat up slowly. "What happened?" She handed him the phone. Silence followed, heavy, growing, suffocating. "I should have seen this coming," he said. She looked at him. "Are they real?" He nodded. "Some of them, twisted, taken out of order. But yes, they're real." "And the worst part?" she asked. "Is that they'll believe every word, because the truth never sounds as exciting as betrayal." By noon, cameras were stationed outside their building. Sponsors were pulling back from the gallery opening. Journalists were digging into her past, his past, Lucas's vanishing act, anything to feed the fire. Emily received dozens of messages, some of pity, some cruel, some demanding to know why she'd sold herself. And yet through it all, Nathan didn't run. He didn't hide. He stood in front of the fire and said what she never thought he would. "We tell the truth. Together." She blinked. "To who?" "Everyone." That night they sat side by side in a television studio. The lights were too bright, the chairs too stiff, the anchor too eager. "We're here tonight with Emily Parker and Nathan Bennett," the woman began, looking polished and rehearsed. "The couple at the center of what some are calling the most calculated marriage scandal of the decade." Emily's throat tightened, but she didn't flinch. Nathan spoke first, calm, measured. "Yes, some of those emails are mine," he said. "They were written before the wedding when I believed Lucas was going to walk away. I considered stepping in, but it wasn't strategy. It was fear that someone I cared about would be left humiliated in front of the world." The anchor leaned in. "But you didn't love her then." "I admired her," Nathan said. "Silently, stupidly, for years. And no, I didn't think I had the right to love her." Emily looked at him, at the man who once watched her from afar and now chose to speak for himself with no mask. She took a breath, then spoke. "I didn't fall in love with Nathan Bennett because of his money, or his name, or because he saved me. I fell in love with the way he left me alone when I needed silence. How he knew what I painted without asking. How he watched me, not like I was something to be won, but like I was something he didn't believe he deserved." The anchor blinked, momentarily silenced. Emily continued, voice steady. "He didn't manipulate me, he waited for me. And I almost never looked back. But the truth always finds you eventually, and when it did, I found him still there, not demanding, not bitter, just hoping I might see him. And I did. There was silence in the studio. Then Nathan reached for her hand and added, "We're not a perfect story. We're not a fairy tale. But we're real. And I'll take real over perfect. Every time." The segment aired that night. And something unexpected happened. People listened, not just to the words, but to the silence between them, to the look on Emily's face when Nathan said, "I didn't believe I had the right," to the way she smiled when she said, "He waited for me." The next morning, the tide turned. Comment sections began to shift. "You can't fake that kind of look. If this is manipulation, I hope someone manipulates me like that someday." They told the truth, and it felt real. Sponsors returned. The gallery opening was reinstated, but more importantly, the weight on their chests began to lift. That night, back home, Nathan stood at the window, hands in his pockets. Emily joined him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I'm sorry it had to happen like this," she said. "I'm not," he replied, "because now they know, all of them, what I knew long before you did." She rested her head against his back. "And what was that? That you were worth every secret, every delay, every silent hope." She turned him gently, stood on her toes and kissed him. Not to silence him, but to answer something even deeper than words. Because love like theirs didn't need permission. It just needed truth. The gallery shimmered with life. Candlelight flickered along the walls, illuminating the soft edges of each canvas. Laughter floated between conversations, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the quiet hum of jazz drifting from a small quartet in the corner. Emily stood in the center of it all, barefoot on the polished concrete floor, her long satin dress brushing against her ankles, her hair pinned loosely like a painter's after a long day. She hadn't meant to cry when the doors opened, but when she saw people pause, really pause, in front of her art, something in her chest melted. This wasn't just a gallery. It was her history, her healing, her truth. And somehow, against all odds, it was also the beginning of something new. From the crowd, Nathan watched her, not as a husband, not even as a benefactor, just as a man still in awe of the woman who, months ago, had been trembling in a wedding gown, and who now stood here, whole. He wore a simple black suit, no tie. His hands were tucked into his pockets, but his gaze never left her. Near the back of the gallery, under a soft golden spotlight, stood a small pedestal. On it, a velvet box. No sign, no label, just waiting. Emily didn't see it until the room had begun to empty. The crowd thinned, conversations softened, and in the hush of the closing evening, Nathan approached her quietly. She turned before he spoke, as if she had known he was coming. "You did it," he said. "No," she whispered. "We did." He smiled. "There's something I want to show you." He led her by the hand to the pedestal. She stared down at the box. He opened it. Inside was the same stone from her original wedding ring, but it was now set in a new design, delicate, timeless, and unlike anything she had seen before, wrapped in golden vines like something found in a storybook. He didn't kneel. He didn't need to. "Emily," he said softly, "I married you once to protect you. But I never asked you if you wanted to be chosen." Her breath caught. "So I'm asking now," he continued, "not out of rescue, not out of responsibility, but out of love. Pure, messy, unfinished. The kind that wakes you in the middle of the night just to watch you breathe." He took her hand. "Will you marry me again? No contracts, no conditions, just two people, finally in the right place, at the right time." Tears filled her eyes. She laughed, the kind of laugh that breaks right before it becomes a sob, and nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "God, yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly. But more than that, it felt right. Like the circle had finally closed. The gallery staff quietly dimmed the lights, and someone started a new song. Soft, slow, something made for moments like this. They danced in the center of the room, alone, surrounded by canvases of all the versions of her she used to be. and for the first time she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Later, as they stepped outside into the soft Manhattan night, Nathan pulled her into his side. "Where do we go from here?" she asked. He smiled. "Anywhere you want." They decided to keep the penthouse, but also restore her grandmother's home in Brooklyn, one for the city, one for the soul. He backed away from public boards and headlines. She poured herself into art, mentorship, and laughter. There were plans for children eventually, but no pressure, no clock ticking. They had already lived through one life. This one, they would build together. On the first morning in their Brooklyn home, she made coffee barefoot in the kitchen while he patched a leaky faucet, terribly. And when she teased him about it, he splashed water on her dress. She retaliated with a kiss. He stopped pretending he knew what he was doing. Later that week, she hung a new canvas in the living room, unfinished, wild, a riot of color. He tilted his head. "What's it called?" he asked. She kissed his cheek. Hope. They found each other in pain, but chose to love in healing. Amid ruins, they built a home without contracts, only commitment. Because true love doesn't start with perfect promises. It starts with the courage to begin again. Sometimes, all someone needs is to be seen. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments. Where are you listening to this message from? Your presence here keeps the flame of these stories alive.